Well, good evening, everybody. It's Chris here from the Whistle Stop Cafe in Muir, Alberta, and I'm also the Chris and the Chris and Kerry Show. I was just reading this, Oh, Canada, Canada and the World, Exploring Our Global Ties. And it's really interesting, this magazine. It's about, Canada, what Canada stands for, what Canada is, what Canada is all about, what the world cares about Canada. Just kidding. Just kidding. It's actually a National Geographic on the cannabis revolution. And I think that's what Canada is about to the world right now. That's the thing over the last 15 years is we legalized cannabis. Not that I think that's a bad thing. There's some pretty interesting things about cannabis. Oh, I dropped my other magazine. But now, unfortunately, the narrative has been taken over by, was it this? Was it Russia? No, it wasn't Russia. It was, wait for it. This is actually what I was reading. I wasn't really reading the National Geographic. I only read the National Geographic for the pictures. Where is it? Where is he? Come on. This is important. Every time we need this guy, we can't find him. We went to Ottawa to talk to him. He got fake COVID and went and hid. He decides he's going to say he's going to resign, and then he goes and hides. Here he is. This guy. Remember this guy? That guy that sits like a real man? Yeah. Unfortunately, those are the two things that Canada is known for right now. And in addition to that, Canada is also known for having a tyrannical prime minister that has trampled the rights and freedoms of his citizens. Unreal. We've seen it talked about in European Parliament. We've seen it talked about all over the world. It's an embarrassment. Even worse are some of the more human stories about what's going on in this country. And a lot of those stem from the coerced uptake of a novel vaccine. A lot of people were hurt. A lot of people were injured. And some people died. Today, Kerry and I had I don't know if you'd say it was a pleasure, but we had the opportunity to attend some court matters where Rath and Company, Jeff Rath and Eva Chipiuk, Jeff Rath, of course, is my lawyer on the class action for businesses in Alberta. They're representing Carrie Sakamoto regarding her vaccine injury in a class action lawsuit for anybody that's been harmed by the COVID jabs. So Kerry and I decided it'd be a great idea to bring Jeff on the show today, especially considering that the Davidson report, which I did a little podcast on a couple of days ago, has just been released and the internet is all abuzz. The media is going absolutely crazy saying, no, that stuff isn't right. That was all done right. It was safe and effective. Okay. Jeff has some other opinions and some real truth to share on that idea of safe and effective. So without further ado, why don't we bring on... There's Jeff. Is Kerry coming too, or Kerry, are you going to hide?
I can come on.
Oh, I thought you got fake COVID for a second there. I was going to send you some. Yeah.
No, I was working on my darkness of my beard. Took months.
You're going to run for prime minister?
No,
you missed a little chocolate pudding right there.
Well, hey Jeff, nice to see you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, since this morning when we were both in court together on the vaccine class action lawsuit. So that was an interesting day, and I think for by way of background for your viewers and your listeners, I think quite a few people are familiar with some of the work that I've been doing over the last 5 years battling COVID tyranny in the province of Alberta. But just for people that don't know who I am, I'm the lead counsel. I was lead counsel in the Ingram decision. Which was the only case in Canada that succeeded in having, all of the public health orders for a province that were presently before a court declared to be illegal or ultra vires. So for people that haven't been watching the show all the time, or people that are tuning in for the first time, some people are actually surprised when I tell them that we have a court ruling that indicates that every single COVID order issued by the great gazoo Dina Hinshaw during the course of the pandemic was illegal, and that we have a court ruling to that effect. And on the basis that all of these orders were determined by the court to be illegal, we've also filed a business class action lawsuit, of which my dear friend Christopher Scott and client is the class representative in the business class action lawsuit, where we're seeking to recover damages against the province of Alberta based on the ruling in the Ingram decision that found all of the lockdown orders to be patently illegal. And as for those of you, of course, who followed the travails of Mr. Scott and the Whistle Stop Cafe, you will all know that Mr. Scott was hauled away in handcuffs for properly protesting what he knew to be illegal orders, and was handcuffed and hauled away to the Huskow illegally because of the fact that he was that the orders that had closed down his business and destroyed his business and led to his business being padlocked and put in the care of the RCMP and AHS so that it could be broken into and gutted and robbed and all of those lovely things that happened while his business was under the care of the RCMP and AHS and Dina Hinshaw. All of the orders that led to that were patently illegal, which the Court of King's Bench confirmed in we now refer to it as Ingram 1 or the Ingram 2023 decision. So moving forward, our office has also been retained by a lovely lady. Her name is Carrie Sakamoto from Lethbridge, who unfortunately for Kerry and her family followed Dr. Hinshaw's advice that you could mix and match vaccines, and as a result has been horribly vaccine injured. The question of her injury being vaccine related isn't even an issue for litigation. She's been recognized as having a bona fide vaccine injury by the government of Canada, no less, through the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. But of course, these governments, negligently and otherwise force people to get injected. I don't like calling them vaccines because they're only a vaccine by definition of a bunch of skullduggery, changing definitions of vaccines from what was normally accepted to what it is now. I normally refer to them as injections or shots or drugs, but and not vaccines, because I don't think properly that they are vaccines on the basis of the definitions that everybody's used to seeing, which is a single shot that provides you robust immunity from a disease. Well, obviously, as anybody who got COVID vaxxed once, twice, 3 or 4 times, and subsequently had 5 or 6 cases of COVID knows, these shots did not prevent anybody from getting the vaccine, notwithstanding all the phony information that was being presented by Dina Hinshaw about 95% efficacy and all the rest of it that turned out to be completely untrue. And of course, as we know, did not lead to Dina Hinshaw, AHS, or any other pushers of this product to advising the public that, hey, by the way, when we were initially pushing these on you and telling you that they're 95% effective, well, the studies have come out now and showed us that we're drastically wrong and that they're probably not effective at all. Of course, none of that happened, because heaven forbid that the truth ever be told in the context of what's going on. So, which brings us now to, there's one other issue, or one other case that we're involved with right now. We've been retained by the Hawes family to represent them with regard to a fatality inquiry involving one of our fellow citizens who suffered death by vaccine, where he was injected with the AstraZeneca vaccine, then the Pfizer vaccine, and then scant few months later, after a number of horrible complications, which included massive swelling of both of his legs, etc., died from what's been termed in the autopsy report capillary leak syndrome. So essentially, he bled to death through his lungs, brought to you by AstraZeneca and Pfizer. So we're taking that issue forward in a fatality inquiry in the provincial court, which interestingly, of course, the government of Alberta tried to stop. They initially filed briefs in that case saying that, this fatality inquiry should be stayed because the Alberta vaccine reporting system is a robust alternative forum that would have allowed for these matters to be considered, and we're suggesting that the very fact that poor Mr. Hawes's death was not reported through the vaccine reporting system meant that it wasn't a vaccine-related death. And they thought on that basis that the vaccine reporting system, the fatality inquiry should be stayed. So when we showed up in court and pointed out to Justice Mason that we were very happy that Alberta was bringing their stay application on the basis of Alberta's robust vaccine reporting system, and I informed the court that I had a number of doctors that were lined up to provide testimony on how not only is the vaccine reporting system in Alberta not robust, but doctors are actively discouraged from reporting vaccine injuries, and that doctors are bullied both through the College of Physicians and Surgeons and otherwise to not report things as vaccine injuries for fear of losing their medical licenses for instilling vaccine hesitancy in the population of anti-vaxxers. I guess that'd be us. So on that basis, the government wanted to stay this thing. And I said, well, no, that's great. I'm happy to have that argument, Justice Mason. And we have all these witnesses lined up to come and testify to the fact that this isn't robust. And if my friend is seriously seeking to put the Alberta vaccine reporting system on trial in these proceedings, we're very happy to do it. And we'll be ready to do that in a couple of weeks. Just let's pull our witnesses together and we'll get going. At which point, the very next day, a letter arrives from Government of Alberta, Department of Alberta Justice lawyers, we put justice in quotes, of course, advising us that they've now reconsidered their position on the stay to avoid it. They didn't say to avoid any arguments over the vaccine reporting system, but on the basis that the family wanted to proceed forward out of the goodness of their hearts, they're allowing the inquiry to
they do those things,
to go forward, without us having to waste anybody's time or pretty gray judicial head, considering the extent to which the vaccine reporting system in Alberta is the biggest scam going, that allows governments to pretend that the vaccine injuries in Alberta are literally a microscopic speck of the total in this province. So all of the misinformationists of the ilk of Timothy Caulfield, Demi Hinshaw, and otherwise could all claim that that the vaccines are safe and effective, right? So anyway,
Jeff, you got to remember. Sorry, Timothy Caulfield got paid like $348,000 to say those things, so they must be true.
Well, and he got an Order of Canada, so that must make it like doubly true that Justin Trudeau thought so much of him that they gave him a shiny little medal, right?
Yeah.
For calling the rest of us liars and misinformationists and anti-vaxxers, and the latest screed from the brilliant Mr. Caulfield in response to the COVID-19 pandemic response task force final report and recommendations is that it will bring Alberta back to the dark ages. This will be the end of civilization as we know it. And
that's his medical opinion, I'm sure.
No, that's his legal opinion. He's a lawyer. He's not a doctor. Everybody needs to remember that, right? Yeah, he teaches. He was teaching in the law school. He's a lawyer, and then they shuffled him over to the medical school because he's so good at chasing down COVID cash for people that he's now involved in some sort of health sciences ish related ongoing money grab to continually fund running around accusing other people of misinformation and all of the other things that he does. So
I thought for sure he must have a very vast background in medicine, because he was tasked with seeking out misinformation relating to COVID and the vaccine online and dealing with it.
No, and not only does he not have a background in medicine, but when one of the most respected educational institutions in the world, specifically Stanford University, convened a symposium inviting people on both sides of the the COVID trenches to come in and, in effect, do an after action hot wash on all of the things that we learned through the pandemic and so on, that we could do better the next time, like not locking healthy people up, like not forcing people to get vaccinated with an experimental drug against their will, all those types of things that people might want to discuss after such a horrific period in all of our lives. Mr. Caulfield refused to attend. And they also invited Dr. Fisman FISMAN fraud fame from Ontario to attend at the Stanford Symposium. And of course, they and all of the other misinformationists on the pro mRNA vaccinate people to death side refused to attend the symposium on the basis that they wouldn't attend a symposium with charlatans like Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who's now the notorious charlatan Jay Bhattacharya with multiple PhDs, masters in public health from Harvard, professorships across 2 faculties, both medicine and economics at Stanford. That famous charlatan Jay Bhattacharya. They didn't want to share a stage with people of that ilk, lest their pristine reputations for truth and goodness be sullied by appearing on such a stage at Stanford University. Of course, we all suspect the reason that they didn't go is that they didn't want to be exposed for what they are in front of the world's leading academics. But that's a matter for debate and something.
Well, that's because they know they know that the truth stands regardless of what people say or the statements they make. They
come on!
If they had them come on and talk to them, then that would show, right?
I thought we did science by consensus now, Chris. Isn't it if we get 10 or 15 of our friends who are all getting money from Pfizer and we could all sit in a room together and at least we have 1 or 2 people from different countries, we can call it an international consensus that's overwhelming, right? And we can disregard the thousands and thousands of scientists that signed the Great Barrington Declaration and all the rest of it, because heaven forbid if anybody so foolish as to disagree with us, they can't be part of the consensus. I mean, it's almost like they don't know the meaning of the word consensus. But I could be wrong. I mean, I'm just a humble barrister, and I'm not a English major, but I'm pretty sure that if you could show the tens of thousands of leading scientists and Nobel Prize winners and the rest of it don't agree with your so-called science, that it's a pretty robust claim to say that it's a consensus. But that's just me. What do I know?
I should have remembered that, because a global news journalist just trashed the Davidson report, saying, it goes against the consensus, and there's a consensus on this, consensus this, consensus that. Completely ignored the thousands of man hours that the people that contributed to that report put in, ignored the decades of experience in relevant fields that the contributors put in. And all it was, no, the government said this, and that was the consensus, so these guys must be wrong. But that brings up another point. Now, Richard here, I actually like this guy because he brings up a really good point. He says, just like you clowns are doctors. Now, Richard, you're correct. I'm not a doctor, and sometimes I'm a bit of a clown. I'll admit that. I enjoy humor. But this clown also pays attention, and I actually have done everything I could over this period of time to talk to people that had opposing views, and their information and facts are sound. So this is a great segue into the reason why we want to talk, Jeff, tonight, which was the Davidson report. I'm sure have you read the whole thing yet? They're doctors, by the way, the people that contributed.
Yeah, and I guess, Richard, unless you missed it at the beginning or maybe weren't paying attention, I'm not a doctor. I'm a lawyer, and I don't purport to be a doctor or don't purport to give medical advice. All I'm doing tonight is actually talking to people about some court cases that I'm involved in, and to provide our fellow citizens an update on what we're doing, and talking to people about things that they need to be paying attention to on a going forward basis that are coming out of a report that's actually written by a whole bunch of doctors. So, I think I'm capable of quoting directly from a document or putting up a page of information that was written by doctors without anybody accusing me of trying to practice medicine without a license. But thanks for your thought in any event. Yeah,
and I can read. So I've read this, and it's pretty robust. It's just data. It's not coming to conclusions about what we should do about anything. It's just like, this is what happened. This is how it happened. This is what we could improve. That's it.
Hey, but speaking of doctors, I'm actually glad that Richard brought that point up. Well, we're speaking about doctors. Do you mind if I can talk a little bit about one of the most interesting conclusions that can be drawn from the Davidson report in the context of Dr. Dina Hinshaw purporting to provide Albertans medical advice? Can I talk about that right now, Chris?
Yes,
absolutely. You mean, are we talking about the same Dina Hinshaw that has a huge amount of medical experience and spends so much time in the field in all of these relevant studies, or the Dina Hinshaw that had a couple years as a MD and then went into bureaucracy?
I think it's the latter one, but I don't really want to cast aspersions on her credentials or otherwise. But one of the things, though, that I was really interested in was that all of us, I think, repeatedly throughout the pandemic heard Dr. Hinshaw repeatedly say that it's a good idea to mix and match the vaccines.
Yes.
And in fact, that's how Kerry was horribly injured. And, we quite strongly suspect, that's what led to the death of Mr. Hawes. And the reason that we say that is, of course, we have somebody that's telling people to mix and match vaccines, but what Dr. Hinshaw apparently didn't know, because maybe it wasn't shared with her by her good friend Teresa Tam on their weekly Zoom meetings of the Chief Medical Officers of Health of Canada Committee, chaired by Dr. Bonnie Henry, where they'd all get together every week and figure out how to fight vaccine injury. One would have thought that maybe at one of those meetings, Teresa Tam could have said, "Hey, Dina, ixnay on the ixnay of the vaccines bay," right? Because Pfizer actually says in its contract with Canada that mixing vaccines is bad, and that Pfizer doesn't recommend that anybody mix their vaccine with anybody else's, because no safety tests have been done on this anywhere. And that's what the vaccine contract says. So maybe you should be quiet about mixing vaccines. So I don't think that conversation happened between Teresa Tam and Dina Hinshaw, because the vaccine contracts, as we've set out in court documents, the Canada vaccine contracts, the portions of it that are in the public sphere that haven't been completely redacted by Canada because they don't want Canadians to know the full extent of the truth of what they did to us. The unredacted portions that we've been able to get our hands on and quote in court pleadings state clearly that the Pfizer vaccine is not warranted for safety or safe use, that it was rushed to market under emergency conditions, that Canada itself accepts all liability for anybody horribly maimed or injured by the vaccine, and that Pfizer specifically warned against mixing the Pfizer vaccine, with any other vaccine. So apparently, Dr. Hinshaw didn't get that memo when she sent out a tweet that I sent to you this afternoon. Do you have that to put up on the screen, Chris, just so that friends of ours that think that I'm making this up would know that I'm not making this up?
We'll put it up, but there was no time for that conversation, Jeff. Like he was too busy fighting heteronormativity, I think. Oh, well, I'm not gonna comment on what they do in their spare time. It's really none of my business, and I could give a shit.
Initially, is this the one? So I know it's the second part to this, but essentially,
no, not that one. We'll come back to that one, because I think it's really laughable that the AMA is worried about misinformation.
Yeah.
When, from what I see from that bottom tweet that says both Pfizer and Moderna are mRNA vaccines. Sounds like the start of a Kamala Harris speech, right? All circles are round. They're not identical.
AI is artificial intelligence.
That's right. They're not identical, but extremely similar. And it's perfectly okay to get one dose of each. In fact, that there is some evidence that suggests this may actually boost your immune response. So it's pretty clear that from that Dr. Hinshaw, I'll put doctor in quotes, was advising Albertans that they should mix and match at least the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. They certainly, with the first shot as the best shot campaign, we're telling people if they had an AstraZeneca vaccine and then it was discontinued, they maybe shouldn't have any more shots until until studies come out to discuss the degree to which you might die from mixing AstraZeneca with Pfizer or Moderna, but none of that happened, of course. Yeah, it'd be good. It would have been nice to know. It would have been nice to know if there was some science, like when people are throwing around words like anti-science and anti-evidence and misinformation. I mean, it would have been nice if Dr. Hinshaw could have cited some science to back that statement up. But what's really interesting is, we have this statement from Dr. Hinshaw, and then what we have now is we have the COVID report that came out. Oh, there we go. There's my camera.
Yep.
That came out in a document dump Friday afternoon at 3:00. That has a whole chapter on vaccines and vaccine harms. And specifically, and this is something that your readers, I think as a public service, need to be aware of, in Appendix 6 of that report. So if you go to the vaccine chapter, it's chapter 8, and then you skip through the appendices to Appendix 6. It's a 2-page appendix.
I'll find it. Yeah.
Okay. There we go. Chapter 8. You're going to go right to the end to the appendices, and it's Appendix 6. So what that appendix confirms is, or Appendix 6 confirms, is that, surprise, surprise, we shouldn't mix and match vaccines because it may kill people. And specifically, what I'm referring to in that regard is a paragraph in Appendix 6 that states specifically, and I'll read it while you're finding it because I think you're getting close. States specifically at the top of the page, Appendix 6, there's a well-documented link between mRNA COVID vaccines and myocarditis in males 12 to 24 years old. Nordic countries have restricted the use of vaccines in children, referencing a large Nordic population-based study which shows that the 28-day risk of inpatient myocarditis was higher in vaccinated compared to the unvaccinated. For males 16 to 24 years, the risk of myocarditis was 5 times higher. So if parents got their kid to take 2 Pfizer shots, the risk of those kids contracting myocarditis, which can be a fatal, life-changing disease, right? It was 5 times, so 500% greater if you just had 2 Pfizers, right? If you had 2 Modernas, your risk was 1,200%, was 14 times higher, so 1,400% higher. And then, importantly, if you had a dose of Pfizer followed by Moderna, right, the risk of myocarditis was 36 times higher. So people don't have to take my word for it. I think it's the page previous to that page.
Right after. Yeah, I found, yeah.
No, it's right before that page.
Oh, is it?
That's the table that accompanies it. It's the paragraph. Oh, no, back. No, other way.
Left.
Keep going a little bit. No, that's it. Keep going. No, you got on the right page. Stop.
Yep.
Okay. No, down a bit. So people, no, down a bit more on the page. Whoever's scrolling. Other way. Other way. Other down. The up down. We're definitely not doctors.
Is it on this page?
We're definitely not doctors. There you go. So anyway, so for people that don't want to take me at my word, right? That's what the report says. Yeah. And then the next page actually, and that's the page with the nice little charts and graphs on it, includes the nice little charts and graphs from that Nordic study that, wasn't misinformation, it wasn't anti-science, it wasn't anti-evidence. This was a study that was published in what's known in the trade as JAMA, or the Journal of the American Medical Association, an extremely well-reputed, peer-reviewed publication, right? That's the science, as opposed to this robust international consensus. And and while we're talking about robust international, consensuses, so on what basis, if 100 scientists are wrong and one scientist is right, shouldn't the one scientist who's right prevail? And isn't that science? Yeah.
We're supposed to burn them at the stake. Then I think.
Well, I'm not sure. I think I could go to any, symposium anywhere in the world and find enough drunken scientists that, to agree with me in a state of inebriation that, the water actually boils at 50 degrees centigrade instead of 100 degrees centigrade at sea level. It's all just, it's all relative, and it depends on, how you look at, what boiling means and what centigrade is and all those types of things, right? So I'm sure that if you put enough money on the table, you could find enough scientists to develop a consensus around that, but I'm sure that the one guy is saying, well, no, I'm pretty sure here I can take a beaker, I can put it on a Bunsen burner, I can put a thermometer in it, I can replicate my results. It's kind of like, the scientific method, that thing that nobody wants to talk about anymore, right? And I'm pretty sure that one person who said that water boils at 100 degrees Celsius at sea level would probably be right, as opposed to, the people that thought otherwise, right? But, well, I don't know, I'm not a scientist either.
Put that back up for just 1 second, Kerry. I just want to point something out. Scroll up to the text, so we'll go backwards in the document. Folks, if you have a look at these notes here, you'll see little numbers at the end of the sentences. For example, the first one that starts Nordic countries has a 292. That's a citation. So at the end of this document, all of those numbers have an accompanying
footnote,
data entry, a footnote. So what this report did is it looked at primary data. Not something that somebody told something. It was primary data from a specific study on that thing. And then they included that data in the report. So you can read that. And if you believe, like the global journalist, that this report is junk or whatever, then she's going to have to go to all of these footnotes and go through all of those and maybe send them all emails to say that their studies are wrong. Because that's what Dr. Davidson and, et al. Did in this document, is they just reviewed the data and put it to the government of Alberta to say, look, here's the data, do what you want with it.
So could we go back to that Appendix 6 page that we were on? There's something else that I wanted to point out. Yeah, unfortunately, once you download this document, I'm going to talk to somebody in the Alberta government and get them to fix the glitch. But once you download the document, the page numbers no longer appear on it. So my copy doesn't have page numbers on it because I don't have the footnote with the page numbers on it. So it's I'm kind of having to flip back and forth and put sticky notes on things. But anyway,
Jeff, Kerry said he's going to narrate this to audiobook so that it's easier.
It'll put people to sleep right
away.
away.
That's awesome. I would buy that audiobook, Kerry, to have you read me to sleep from the COVID task force report.
The efficiency of COVID-19 vaccines.
Right? Yeah, that's right. So on a complete aside, I know this is off topic for tonight, but did anybody else just about die laughing? Keep going, your appendix one now, but die laughing the other day when some reporter foolishly asked Pierre Poilievre what he thought about Donald Trump, considering there were two genders, and when Poilievre replied to him, like the reporter was 4, and he says, almost like, well, little Johnny, I think there's 2 genders. There's a boy and a girl. How many genders do you think there are? Can you name them? I mean, that's one of the funniest things I've seen in weeks. But anyway,
it's funny, but it's also terrifying because, Jeff, did you ever think in your adult life that we would have a time where the president of the United States had to declare that there are 2 genders? Like, was that something ever on your radar?
Never saw it coming.
No, me neither. What kind of a world do we live in? Now, next we're going to have a declaration.
but hang on. Sorry, I didn't mean to digress, but let's get back to, let me tell you what other kind of world we live in. So let's go down from on the same page, Appendix 6. So scroll up. Okay, stop. Where it says a U.S. Lancet published study assessing the long-term health quality of life effects of adolescents and young adults diagnosed with myocarditis following vaccination found that they were unable to complete their usual activities, 21%, had pain, 20%, and had high anxiety or depression, 46%, in 90 days following diagnosis. Okay? So that's for parents who were told that, these vaccines are good for kids. Now, the other one, and this one's going to be a bit problematic because I do not have page numbers on my document, but there's another paragraph that I'd like you to find. And if it helps you find it, in my book, it's 2 pages after this chart.
Just tell me a phrase on it. It's probably easier for me to find it that way.
Oh, okay, even better. Search the word. Surveillance. That probably comes up too many places. Here's one because it probably isn't used in a lot of places. And this is a strange abbreviation. So I type in Mayo / PERICARDITIS. Myo/pericarditis.
Slash or dash?
No, / /pericarditis.
No, it doesn't show up on.
Okay, well, it's in the vaccine chapter, but anyway, we can try to find it together, page by page. It's after this is the Cleveland Clinic graph, right? If you can find the Cleveland, just scroll through chapter 8 and find the Cleveland Clinic graph, and then it's 3 pages after that. So you need
While
to
you're
be
doing that, it's interesting that the report mentions the anxiety and depression. So currently in the United States, the new administration they're on a crusade to investigate the link between neurological issues and childhood vaccines.
Okay, well, let me read this. Let me read this one to you, because this is from a paper, another paper published in Lancet, and says there's a well-documented link between mRNA COVID-19 vaccines and myocarditis in males 12 to 29 years old. A follow-up surveillance paper published in the Lancet on myocarditis in vaccinated 12 to 29-year-olds this time demonstrated an abnormality on cardiac MRI in 81 of 151 patients. So more than 51% of patients in this Lancet study, right, that they just randomly pick vaccinated people to look at, right? More than 51% of them had detectable abnormalities on a cardiac MRI. I'm there now. Okay, 2 pages on from that now, I'm told from by doctor friends of mine that that's a really bad thing. Right there we go. That's the paragraph.
Okay.
So then it goes on to say the same study revealed that 32% of patients, so this is young men, 12 to 29 years old, revealed that 32% of these patients were not cleared for physical activity, and 26% were still on daily medications, so those would be cardiac medications, at least 90 days post-diagnosis. So let's think about that for a minute and how much myocarditis denial is going on in Canada. And I think we looked at it earlier in Appendix 6, where an Ontario study found 1 in 5,139 male adolescents will get myocarditis, but a Thai study found 71%, and this Lancet study found over 51%. Right? So, we have to, and I'm aware of, and it's not, I don't think it's referenced in this report, but I'm also aware of an Alberta study that found myocarditis in 1 in 2,000 in Alberta following the shots. Right? Mm-hmm. So, all of the stuff that we've been fed by the federal government about, we've given over 100 million blah blah doses and so low minuscule major events, and you take right. even if we killed 10,000 people compared to the 100 million blah blah blah, that's 0.00 blah 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 whatever, right? Well, these studies don't bear that out. I mean, myocarditis rates of 50%. I've spoken to doctors in this province who have told me that they're literally seeing heart attacks in children under the age of 15, and that they've got cases of, myocarditis cases in their office where, privately they've advised me that they don't think these kids are going to live for more than another 5 years.
Wow.
Right? So, we've got this, and again, it just underlines what Peter McCullough has been warning everybody about from day one, which is these so-called vaccines are really cardiotoxic injections, right, that are literally killing the hearts of children in our country, right? So let's everybody just absorb that for a second and think about how bloody angry every parent should be that was told that the vaccines were safe and effective for their kids, and who were not specifically warned by Dina Hinshaw, Verna Yu, Jason Kenney, Theresa Tam, Justin Trudeau, any of these people mandating people to get shots, or telling parents that, their kids aren't going to be able to go play hockey unless they get a shot, or forcing university kids to get shots in order to go to classes and train for collegiate sports. All of those things that happened, right? Oh yeah, let's pump these really active, healthy young adults full of cardiotoxins, right? And see what we get. And again, I don't know if any of you guys saw it. It was a pretty stupid on my part to go on the Ryan Jesperson show, but I did that one day just out of an interest in trying to speak to a broader audience. And I was telling Jesperson about, and this is an anecdote, of course, but anecdotal evidence is still evidence. I was speaking to one of the young women who works at my golf club this summer, who's a collegiate hockey player at the University of Calgary. And she told me that she now has to go and get myocarditis exams every 90 days, right? Because of the vaccines that she took, and that, get this, 3 of her 20-something-year-old colleagues on her hockey team have now been told by their physicians that they can no longer play collegiate level sports because their hearts have been damaged so badly with myocarditis. Wow. So much for mild myocarditis. It's only mild. Oh, don't worry about myocarditis. It's mild myocarditis. It's whatever, right? So, which is, again, you want to talk about misinformation and disinformation. If the AMA is so concerned about that, why aren't they going after, Dr. Hinshaw for misinformation and disinformation when the words mild myocarditis could trip so lovingly from her lips? Right? I mean, that's a question for all of them. Like all of the pro-vax propagandists, myocarditis. Yeah, don't worry about it. Sure, half of the people get it, but it's mild. Well, right? It's just mild. It's just mild, potentially fatal heart disease. Right?
It gets worse, though. It gets worse, Jeff. Like this, it's one thing if the shot that caused the mild myocarditis was saving the planet, saving the world. Read the last sentence in that paragraph. The very last sentence. Oh,
which page are we on now? Are we on appendix 6? Oh, yeah. Mary's myocarditis could be a very serious long-term health issue. According to Alexander and co-workers' 20-year study of 170 children with...
Back, this part. The relative risk of the first dose may be more than 6 times the risk of COVID-19 hospitalization. So they're literally sacrificing young people for no reason. Like they didn't need it in the first place.
We always said that kids were never going to die from COVID. And again, I've raised the issue, and I've called for a police investigation into fraud with regard to Table 14 of the Pfizer emergency use authorization. And I think some of you heard me talk about it before, but in that table that Pfizer used to get their emergency use authorization, they posited that as many as 1 child per million could potentially die from COVID. We know the number is actually much lower now, right? So it's less than 1 child per million may have died from COVID.
Statistically zero.
Right. So, but then they say, but we do acknowledge that the Pfizer vaccine will result in so many hospitalizations and at least 34 ICU admissions of children who get the vaccine. And then, so they're going to put 34 kids into ICU on a ventilator. And then if you go to the end of the table, and this is where I say the fraud comes in, it says number of children potentially killed by the vaccine, basically is the table. I can't remember the exact wording of the table. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, right? So you talk to any pediatric specialist or any ICU specialist, and maybe some of these people that run around calling us misinformationists might in fact be pediatric ICU specialists. I'd like to know. But I'd like one of those people who accuses us of misinformation to tell me statistically, when you put 34 kids on a vent, how many of them are going to die? Mm-hmm. And I suspect the number is higher than 0. And I've actually heard from experts who are, experts in pediatric ICU that the real number is probably closer to 20%, of kids that go on to a vent with myocarditis severe enough to have them ventilated are likely never going to come off the vent and are going to die. So, what's that number, right? On 34, it's approximately 6 or 7, I think. But, so at the very least, they were going to kill 6 or 7 kids per million with myocarditis. But here's the rub. The only number, because the number of COVID deaths per million in children was so low, and they put 1 notionally in the, in that column, right? Any number greater than 0, right, would mean that the vaccine wouldn't get approved for children. Because if they acknowledged there'd be even 1 death per million in children from the COVID vaccine, the benefit of the vaccine would not exceed the harm that they're trying to ameliorate, which was COVID. So any number of deaths more than 0, right, from the vaccine would lead to the vaccine not being approved. We also know that Pfizer scrubbed. There was one girl in the original trial that developed transverse myelitis and died. She was scrubbed from the study, and they tried to erase her data. We also know that good old-fashioned anaphylactic shock and anaphylaxis kills people. But, it was remarkable in the Pfizer, this is how many kids are going to die from COVID, how many kids are going to die from Pfizer. The only cause of death that Pfizer considered to be relevant was myocarditis. So they must have thought that was the greatest risk. Right? But no transverse myelitis, no capillary leak syndrome, no anaphylaxis, all these other things that we know, kill people in the context of vaccines, all conveniently omitted from Table 14 in order to get the drug approved in children. And I think some of you may or may not know, I personally wrote to Theresa Tam, I personally wrote to Dina Hinshaw. I attached a copy of Table 14. I advised them of the fact that the table on its face appeared to be fraudulent, and that they needed to take a really hard second look at Pfizer's data before they approved those vaccines for use in kids. Needless to say, I was ignored. I haven't been able to ascertain whether any investigation whatsoever was ever undertaken by Alberta Health, AHS, Dina Hinshaw, Theresa Tam, anybody in fact, with regard to Table 14. And we know the results. We now have a childhood vaccine rollout, and we literally potentially have thousands of children in Alberta. One estimate I heard from a physician in the province, as many as 2,000 kids in Alberta that are cardiac cripples that may have less than 5 years left to live because nobody told their parents, look, we can give you this shot. We don't have enough safety data on it to really recommend it for kids. But if you're really paranoid and really insist that that your kid gets this shot, from the standpoint of informed consent, you just need to know this one thing, right? Mm-hmm. And the one thing is, this vaccine will kill more children than COVID. Okay? So parent, that's the fact, right? Mm-hmm. Now, do you still want me to give your kid? Oh, and then by the way, we also have information that as many as 50% of children could in fact develop, crippling myocarditis, and there's some other little associated things, but Jeff, whatever. Would you still give your kid the shot? If any parent, any sane parent was given that information, which parent would have given their child that shot? Not one.
You know what? I disagree with you on that one, because I think there is so much misinformation out there that even if you told them that, showed them charts, told them all these doctors were doing it, they would still go, no, it's safe enough.
But that's the whole point, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The point is that our so-called public health officials that were supposed to be protecting the public, right, shouldn't have been engaged in an exercise fighting vaccine hesitancy where any countervailing argument was labeled as anti-vax, lunacy, conspiracy theory bullshit. And you need to listen to us because we're the health professionals, right? Listen to us. Dina Hinshaw, how many times did you say, I am your doctor? Yeah. I am the doctor for everybody in Alberta. Okay, well, let's go back to that. And let's go back now to what I was telling you guys about Dina Hinshaw recommending that everybody get I'm going to come back to that in 1 second. The other one I want to touch on as well, because it shocked me. Like it absolutely shocked me. I can't say it shocked my conscience because I've been fighting in the trenches for 5 years trying to stop all of this garbage. And was not ever involved in recommending that any pregnant woman get vaccinated with a COVID shot. Thank God for the common sense of lawyers as opposed to so-called doctors, right? But what we find in the vaccine, in the vaccine chapter of that report, is that there is a section that deals with pregnancy, and it sort of hints a little bit because it's coming directly. It's coming directly from Pfizer's own data again. So if people want to accuse people of misinformation or disinformation or whatever, just know that the information that I'm citing comes directly from Pfizer. So if you're accusing Pfizer of misinformation or disinformation, then I think we have a problem of an entirely different order of magnitude. Because I think if everybody on the Timothy Caulfield vaccine propaganda side wants to acknowledge that Pfizer was guilty of spreading misinformation and that we're quoting Pfizer generated misinformation on this program, well then, I'll happily acknowledge that Pfizer, is lying, and they made up numbers about how many miscarriages they caused in women in their vaccine trial who weren't necessarily pregnant at the start of the trial because they wouldn't let pregnant women in, but who got pregnant during the trial. And then when Pfizer reported the outcomes of those pregnancies, and again, if you can find the page, and I apologize that my page
Horrifying number.
Oh yeah, just so that's the page you're going to start on. It's that table. It's in the vaccine. Yeah, it's in the vaccine chapter. But let me read on so our friends at home that are watching aren't waiting too long. So anyway, what Pfizer found was that first of all, I'm going to read the entire quote. So this is the task force quoting a report of Dr. Pierre Corey's analyzing the Pfizer trial data in pregnant women, and quoting Dr. Corey quoting Pfizer data. That's the page. Now move down a little bit, I think. Yeah. Table 1. Okay, there we go, starting there. So in August of 2022, Dr. Pierre Corey, MD, MPA, published his analysis of the Pfizer trial data concerning pregnant women. Dr. Corey found that according to Pfizer, quote, cumulative analysis of post-authorization adverse events report, section 5.3.6 on page 12, 270 pregnancies were reported during the trial. Of these, 238 had no outcome attached to them. And then Corey says, no explanation in this document for the lack of reporting. Did they lose the chart? The remaining 32 had the following results. And keep in mind, I'm sure if those 238 charts that were lost had an outcome, right, it would have been reported, because this is what was reported. And this is shocking. So out of the 32 charts that Pfizer referenced, the pregnant women in their trial, 32, so 23 had spontaneous abortions, 2 spontaneous abortions with intrauterine death, 2 premature births with associated neonatal death, 1 spontaneous abortion with neonatal death, and out of 32 cases, only 1 normal pregnancy outcome. So just doing the math on that, like 30 seconds, right? So the abortion rate, hang on. Did we lose you? Am I there?
You're
okay.
there.
Okay. I just had something flash up saying lost network connection.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, maybe Pfizer is cutting in. So anyway, So in other words, 31 out of 32 spontaneous abortions or spontaneous abortion with neonatal deaths, right? So that's 96.875% abortion or miscarriage rate in the women that Pfizer actually reported on who were pregnant in their trial. Yet again, how many times, and this was in the trial data, so that was there for Dina Hinshaw to read. That was there for Theresa Tam to read. They're all on the same, anti-vaccine hesitancy committees every week talking about how to, get people to not hesitate to get the vaccine. And those pregnant women, they're going to be pesky, because those pregnant women who carry babies in their bellies, they really care about that baby and want it to be healthy, and they take vitamins and stuff, and they want to do the best they can with their baby to have the healthiest baby possible. So what are we going to tell those women to get them to take the shot? I know. Let's ignore the Pfizer trial data that shows a 96.875% spontaneous abortion rate, and tell pregnant women that it's safe and effective for pregnant women to get the shot, and that they're a greater risk for the babies is to get COVID rather than get the COVID shot. So let's tell them that. But while we're telling them that, let's not tell them that if they get the COVID shot, they can still get COVID. Right? This is what was going on. Like, you can't make this stuff.
You cannot make this up. No,
right? And this is all the while, okay, well, Dina Hinshaw is standing up in front of the province pretending to tell pregnant women and parents of children who are not vulnerable from COVID really in any way, right? That, you got to get the shot, because if you don't get the shot, the repercussions are so serious, and blah, 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 blah. And the science says that you need to do this, blah, blah, blah. And of course, what we see now, like from Pfizer's own data in both of the instances I walked you through, right? None of the things that Dina Hinshaw said were true, right? So she wasn't dispensing medical advice. She was the medical equivalent of Mary Curie standing up and saying, hey, kids, it's okay to play with uranium. I did it, right? I mean, that's fine. Nothing bad can come from that, right? And then the other one that the other analogy that I thought of when you think about this, mix and match the vaccines. The more different vaccines you have, the better. Like, at that point, and there's no studies on this, there's no science on that, all of that, right? The drug manufacturers themselves strongly recommend it, say it's contraindicated to mix and match their vaccines, right? But there she is spewing this stuff to the public like she's the ASL translator at Nelson Mandela's funeral, going, yes, these are safe and effective, and, they won't kill your babies. This is what we're dealing with. I mean, it's a level of medical negligence and gross incompetence that would have had any other doctor's license pulled by the College of Physicians and Surgeons. Like, how can somebody live with themselves, having made the statements that were made as Alberta's doctor, yet refuse to come forward and take responsibility for what you did and acknowledge that the information that you were providing throughout the pandemic was anti-scientific, not based on any science studies, and just like that ASL interpreter at Nelson Mandela's funeral, you were just making it up as you went along. I mean, that's what we're dealing with. It's shocking. Like, I'm flabbergasted. Like, I've been spending the entire day just trying to wrap my head around, this concept, because it's completely mind-blowing that this is what we're dealing with. And what's even worse, so to my way of thinking, is that there has been this report has been on the Alberta government desk for desks, I understand, from statements made by the premier for months. Yeah. So why, when this report came out, why wasn't this report immediately, and I'm sure it may well have been, gone immediately to our Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Jaffe, so that Dr. Jaffe could go, oh my God, this is really bad.
He doesn't want to see that.
This is really bad. We were really bad. I better tell people immediately and tell pregnant women immediately to stop taking the shots until we can study this properly and figure out how many babies we killed during the pandemic with the shots, like, for real. And then, oh my God, we better stop all of these childhood vaccines, or at the very least tell people that, all of Dr. Himshaw's guidance about mixing and matching the vaccines is wrong, right? And that anybody who still is getting boosted, I understand that at least 94% or 93% of Albertans now are anti-vaxxers, because there's only between 5 and 7% of Albertans that are still getting boosters. So for all of y'all that have joined us, welcome. But, for the 5 or 7% or whatever it is of people that are still getting boosters, shouldn't there be a direction going out through the College of Pharmacy from the Alberta government telling every pharmacist to make sure when people come in for their boosters that they're not mixing and matching them? Like, I stopped today. I was so shocked by this today, and absorbing this while I was in court arguing over other stuff, but that I literally stopped at my pharmacy on the way home, because I have a pharmacist who's has way more degrees than he needs to pump pills out of the back of a pharmacy, but very well educated guy, really follows what's going on pharmacologically and whatever. And I asked him, asked him specifically whether he was aware of the JAMA study, right, that said that you shouldn't be mixing the Pfizer vaccine with the Moderna vaccine because it'll increase the risk of myocarditis 36 times or 3,600%. He said, no, that's for real? I said, yeah. I said, I'll give you the article, but you need to read it. Because if people are coming in and you don't know their medical history and know what their last booster was, this whole idea that whatever ones you have on the shelf, if you happen to be on a Pfizer, it's okay to give Moderna and vice versa, and that people don't care anymore because Dina Hinshaw has told them in American Sign Language that it's safe to mix and match the vaccines and it's good for you, right? Those people could suffer serious repercussions. I mean, for those of us that are still drinking the Kool-Aid and getting the shots. Mm-hmm. So, but where's the Alberta government telling pharmacists and pharmacies that this is dangerous and they need to stop doing it? Yeah. And my sense of it, what? Go ahead.
We have a big, very, very big problem right now because this report was actually presented to caucus on last Wednesday. They all know,
2 days before,
every one of them knows, the information's out there, the studies are out there. Like, any professional in the medical field can look at this report and go to the citations and read it themselves. They know. So now, if it continues, now what? What does that mean, Jeff?
Well, that's, I think that, that's one of the reasons we have this vaccine class action lawsuit going forward in front of, in the court. But I would far rather that my fellow citizens' children aren't put at risk of death, and my fellow citizens who are still getting the shots because they still believe, the propaganda that they were sold aren't put at risk of death. And I think that, this information needs to get out there. And I would far rather see the information get out there and have the government entirely discontinue the shots than I have a whole bunch of new plaintiffs that are, living with half of a functional heart.
Yeah.
Which is what's going on. And it's completely unconscionable that anybody in the Alberta government doesn't see this report of Gary Davidson's as a fire alarm having been pulled, and that they need to evacuate the building. And then once they get to their points of, their organizational points after the fire alarm has been pulled, everybody from the scientific advisory group and all of those people in AHS that are now outside in neat little files on the lawn, can all be separated from the herd and fired, right? Before we then let all the adults go back into the building and figure out what we're going to do to fix this mess that all of the people who've been involved in calling the rest of us disinformationists and all of the other names that they call us, while spewing out the words safe and effective ad nauseum, telling pregnant women to get vaccinated, encouraging parents to give their kids myocarditis, all of that, right? Maybe all of those people need to be sorted out and fired, haul them out from under, I know we can't have a fire drill, but I really do think this report is a fire alarm. Find all the desks that those people are hiding under and haul them out by their ears and show them the door, so that people that actually care about medical ethics, that actually care about informed consent, that actually care about the health of their fellow Albertans are put in charge of what's going on. And everybody, that has been involved in the cover-up and perpetuating the cover-up, including everyone at the College of Physicians and Surgeons. That chapter alone in this report, is recommended reading for everybody in this province to understand the degree to which the propagandists in AHS and Alberta Health, coming from Dina Hinshaw on down, were basically utilizing, the College of Physicians and Surgeons as their anti-vaccine hesitancy enforcement arm, right? And instead of the college stepping back as a neutral regulator, telling doctors how to prescribe medicines and what medicines they can't prescribe or what advice they can't give and all the rest of it, if the college had just stayed the hell out of it, we probably wouldn't have as many injured children today. Mm-hmm. But there's a huge amount of culpability that lies with the college, and what I consider this report details as the complete corruption of the College of Physicians and Surgeons. Needs to be taken into account, and the College of Physicians and Surgeons needs to be taken out under and there's a mechanism to do it under the Public Health Act. The Minister of Health has the authority on 60 days notice to the college to basically shut them down and take over health regulation in the province. But, following a 60-day period of consultation. So for maybe 60 days, the Minister of Health should lock them all in a room and make them read this report 100 times.
That would be a good idea. Yeah, I agree with that.
Right?
This gets even grosser, though, and it just occurred to me, all these issues that are going to arise from this, and you mentioned there's a bunch of kids going to need hearts in 30 or 40 years. Well, guess what?
Where are you going to get the healthy? Where are you going to get the healthy hearts?
Don't worry, Jeff. They're printing them. Within 20 to 30 years, we're going to have 3D printed viable hearts available for transplant at a significant cost to the taxpayer. All of the treatments for all of these diseases, all the money for that goes to the same people that did this to us in the first place. That's how absolutely sickening this is. It's gross.
Jeff, can we actually talk a little bit about the process that's happening with the class action right now? Because I know that's what a lot of people came on here to find out. I think a lot of people know, or at least have a good inkling of what happened with the report. And I'm not sure exactly what we can talk about in the court today. Can we actually kind of talk verbatim? Or
well, I think one of the most important takeaways for first of all, for people that want to get quote unquote get involved in the class action. To the extent that the business class action was certified, you're already involved because the law is in Alberta. You're part of the case unless you physically opt out, and we're in the process of agreeing with the court what the process is going to be for that, advertising for that. People that don't want to be considered part of the class action then simply just have to fill out a form, send it to the office, say, hey, you guys, you're on your own. I don't want any money out of the class action. I'm going to do my own thing. Whatever. So that's the process there. So the law in Alberta on class actions, once they're certified, everybody's in until they take themselves out. Okay. So the class criteria. So that being said,
vaccine injured.
Well, no, that's the business class action. It's certified. So that's until the Court of Appeal, unless the Court of Appeal overturns the certification, we're the business class action is certified, and everybody's in until they opt out. Is the law. Right? Where we're at with the vaccine class action, right, is we're in the process of trying to get it certified. So there's a whole process involved in that. And the part of the process that you guys were watching today, I think somebody framed it really well. It's like, oh, so this is just an argument about like when you're going to have an argument. So what happened? And it was a very technical proceeding today. Not much turns on the result one way or another. Right. What the province of Alberta is arguing is that they in Canada, before we get to certification, because they don't want the court to see any evidence. There's nothing to see here, court. Don't worry about this, court. Don't look at the Alberta government report that literally confirms and corroborates all of the things that were pled in the statement of claim in the vaccine class action about government misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy to commit assault on citizens of Alberta by preventing them from getting, being able to provide informed consent. Don't worry about any and all of that stuff, Judge. We're going to deal with that, without evidence in a striking motion. So we're going to try to get the whole claim kicked out, before you actually have to look at any evidence or even look at Gary Davidson's, the task force report, to know that everything that Rath and company are saying about the government is actually true and confirmed by the government, right? So that's what the argument was about today. So, but that being said, the most shocking, and this isn't the first day they've said it, what your listeners or viewers rather need to internalize is that lawyers paid for by their tax dollars and the government of Alberta stood up in court with a straight face and said, Judge, there's nothing to see here. This action can't succeed. Yeah, we concede that Dina Hinshaw was an employee of the government of Alberta, and in a normal sense, we'd be liable for whatever Dina did, like if she ran over somebody with a car. But this isn't that. This is just her giving not even medical advice. We won't call it medical advice because if it's medical advice, there might be a connotation that we could be sued. But no, just her talking in public about policy and what she thinks policy direction should be. There's no duty of care here. We have no duty of care to the citizens of Alberta. Right, notwithstanding.
I've said that many times. Yeah.
They kept repeating. There's no duty of care. Your government doesn't think they had a duty of care towards you. They could put Dina Hinshaw up on TV every day doing her, American Sign Language interpreter impersonation, making up the most outlandish, stuff, not based in science. Tell everybody that it's science. Tell everybody that things were safe, that they were effective, that babies died from COVID, and that people dying from 4-stage cancer died of COVID, and all those types of things. But nothing to see here. We don't have a duty of care for any of that. The takeaway that I had from this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is basically the class action is suing the government. But the government is saying, no, our agencies, AHS and RCMP and whoever else enforced all that. No, it doesn't matter. You can't sue the government because it's the agencies that are dealing with it. It's the people that we told to do the things that they did that you should have sued, right?
We paid them to do it, but it's not our fault.
Yeah, that's right. And we directed them to do it and we told them to do it, but it's not our fault. Once you hire a hitman, right, it should all be on him, right? Is effectively the same, sort of logic that they're pursuing. But to be clear, and Chris was there for all of that because he, of course, is our representative plaintiff in the business class action. Yeah. Every single argument today that they made in court today, they made in front of Justice Feasby in the business class action, and he rejected every single one of those arguments out of hand. Right? It's like, well, wait a minute. You can't say that because it was AHS, that directed the RCMP to put Chris, to put Chris Scott in handcuffs and destroy his business and haul him away and illegally imprison him and all that kind of stuff. Don't say the government of Alberta did that. Like, no. That was AHS and the RCMP, and you've sued the wrong people. You shouldn't be suing the government of Alberta. And of course, Justice Feasby completely shredded that argument, refused to acknowledge that it had any validity or any merit, right? Certified the class action. And on top of it, in the context, and that ruling of Justice Feasby's, by the way, so everybody knows, your tax dollars are paying lawyers to appeal to the Alberta Court of Appeal. Yeah. And of course, they're dragging their feet and they're in no rush to get to the Court of Appeal because the longer they delay, the longer it is before the government has to pay, right? So they're taken to the Court of Appeal. And guess who the Attorney General is of Alberta? Mickey Amery. Guess who Mickey Amery was in COVID years? He was the only non-cabinet minister member of the COVID cabinet. So as a lawyer, he was in on every single thing that went on and every single decision that was made by Jason Kenney and others, which Justice Feasby said they either knew or should have known were patently illegal, specifically making up, giving orders to Dina Hinshaw and telling her to pretend they were medical officer orders when really they were orders coming directly from cabinet and Jason Kenney. And what Justice Feasby said about that is our argument prevailed that to the extent that it was more than plausible that the government, the cabinet was pushing out the orders through Dina Hinshaw under the Public Health Act as opposed to the Emergencies Management Act, is that they did not want to be politically accountable for those decisions. They didn't want to have to go to barbecues in their riding or take phone calls from constituents because, during COVID we weren't allowed to have barbecues anymore, but whatever.
They did, though.
You could.
Yeah,
if
well,
you had-
they did. Yeah, I also heard a bunch of them flew up to Fort Vermilion for for a birthday party of a friend of Travis Kay's, but that's a different issue, right? But I mean, those are unsubstantiated rumors, of course. But but anyway, getting back to the main point, the court found it was more than plausible that the reason that they didn't want to push out the orders under the Emergencies Act and instead pretended that they were Dina Hinshaw's orders under the Public Health Act was to avoid a political accountability. Because of course, let's think about this. If you're a cabinet minister, and we actually, there's a number of them hiding under their desks right now since the Davidson, the COVID task force report came out, right? But leaving that aside, the real issue that the court found was, the fact that, and this is what we said in argument. Look, if these people had to make the orders under the Emergencies Act and had to be directly accountable to their constituents, these orders might not have been made.
That's true.
Because they didn't want to take, it's obvious they didn't want to take the political heat for them. They hid behind Dina Hinshaw and pretended that she was the one making the orders. That's why we won Ingram, right?
She was the fall guy.
That's right. So, and of course, she wasn't taking that line down. So it's one of those situations. They're pointing at her and she's pointing directly back at them. And of course, the judge believed her rather than them because they relied on cabinet privilege and wouldn't show up and give evidence in any event, let alone be cross-examined. But that's a different story. But so the court believed Dr. Hinshaw that she was not the one making the orders and that it was in fact cabinet that was making the orders, right? And so which brings us forward to Feasby, who said, look, that's a plausible misfeasance in public office. That's not being done for a bona fide public purpose, like an emergency. These are being pushed out as public health orders so that cabinet could avoid political liability by making these orders as emergency orders under the Emergencies Act. So, and again, just to close the loop on this, people in Alberta need to ask themselves, like, what kind of taste it leaves in their mouth to know that Mickey Amery, as the Attorney General of Alberta, is directing government lawyers at government expense, right, to go to the Court of Appeal to try to set aside a ruling that may have in fact found that he had plausibly engaged in a misfeasance in public office. Let that sink in for a minute, right?
It tastes like Jameson whiskey.
Yeah, well, I think Jameson tastes a lot better than that, frankly. That to me tastes like something like a leprechaun might do in your mouth while you're sleeping. But anyway, I mean, this is what we're dealing with, and I guess, and I hate to come across like I'm being facetious about these things, and that that I'm making a big joke out of all of this. But honestly, guys, if I wasn't laughing, I'd be crying. Like when I think about all the kids that have been, horribly injured, when I think about all the women that have lost their babies and lost their pregnancies because they were told that this was the right thing to do and it was safe and effective. I mean, it literally breaks my heart. And I mean, this is what we're dealing with. And this is what people need to internalize. And while we're on that, because one of the reasons, like when I say you either opt in or opt out of class actions, we are, when you go to our websites, both on the vaccine class action and the business class actions, we have intake forms where we're asking people to fill them out, provide us their contact information, tell us how it was, that you were injured following the vaccine, et cetera, so that we can start generating our own internal statistics, from people that are sharing their information with us through the COVID website. So I would really, and again, keep in mind what happens, like, if a pregnant woman loses her baby, one of these, pro-vaccine doctors, oh, well, it's a mystery and we don't know why that could happen. And, a lot of this stuff is just baffling. Like nobody will say the word vaccine out loud because of, they've been trained really well by the college not to promote vaccine hesitancy. Same thing with children that have been diagnosed with myocarditis, or young adults that have been diagnosed with myocarditis, pericarditis, which is the damage to your veins and your arteries, right? Any of those diagnoses, right? All of the doctors that are treating these people, well, not all of them. Some doctors are being honest, but still, there's quite a few doctors in this province. Oh, well, we don't know what causes that, and this is an exceptionally rare condition, and and especially if you're the pediatrician that recommended that the kid get vaccinated because it's safe and effective, right? Are you going to tell the parents, like, I really screwed up here? You need to take a look at this, this study from Lancet that indicates that 50%, we should have known that 50% of kids getting the shot, the Pfizer shot, we're going to get myocarditis. And you should really be suing my ass off because, I gave you some really, really, really bad advice that I shouldn't have given you. And I should have done a deep dive into publicly available information like Pfizer, EUA table 14 that makes it clear that the vaccines are going to kill more children than COVID. I really wish I did that. I think you should sue me. So how many doctors out there do you think are giving their patients that little pep talk, right? Instead, what parents are getting is it's all the divide and conquer nonsense. This is really rare. We don't know what happened. This is so rare.
It's your fault somehow.
Yeah, I've never seen this before, and this is so rare. We'll do the best we can. There are treatments, and your child can go on all these various cardiac medications, and you better restrict his activities because if he's now got the heart of a 70-year-old, and if he runs too hard, he could die. So we got to monitor his physical activity. At least that's what Lancet says. In 32% of the cases, you could look forward to. That's what's actually going on. So, there's a real lack of transparency that we're observing through other physicians who are being honest about these things, that are attempting to document these things and are attempting to even bringing this information forward, to our office, on a confidential, basis. That's what's going on. And parents in this province need to be furious. They need to demand that Danielle Smith root out every single cabinet minister in her government that is responsible for this and advise them that they're really not qualified to be dog catchers. After, the fact that they all went along with all of this and the fact that all of the people that have, that I understand are in government, in the bureaucracy, in cabinet, whatever, have been involved in slow walking the publication of the task force final report, who've been involved in not insisting that Mark Joffe immediately advise pregnant women to never, ever get a COVID shot ever again. Advise Albertans that you better be pretty careful if you're still on the vaccine Kool-Aid train and don't mix your shots because there's a pretty strong signal that, that's really bad for your heart, right? Mm-hmm. But, all of that needs to happen. Yeah. And I have nothing but respect for Premier Smith, and I can appreciate how difficult her job is. I mean, especially now that she's the only adult in the room when it comes to the tariff discussions, and she's effectively
the only thing she's dealing with.
Yeah, right. This isn't the only thing she's dealing with. So she's effectively Canada's Minister of External Affairs, trying to keep the rest of the morons from economically destroying our country by engaging in a tit-for-tat tariff war with our largest trading partner, right? Mm-hmm. So she's pretty busy, but at the same time, from the standpoint of both her reputation and the reputation of her government, because this isn't Jason Copping's government, this isn't Jason Kenney's government, this isn't Nixon's government, this isn't Mickey Amory's government, this is her government. I really hope that she internalizes that, and I'm looking forward to some very strong leadership here, in the next couple of weeks as the Premier herself internalizes, this task force report, as not being misinformation, as being, a very, very fair and even-handed discussion of what transpired through COVID, and does the right thing and starts implementing a number of the recommendations in this report, including immediately halting the availability of any of these vaccines in Alberta. Mm-hmm. Right? First of all, I think we're at a point now with therapeutics and otherwise, we realize people are better off with therapeutics. Fluvoxamine is a good one that the Ontario Science Table stated outright reduced COVID deaths by 90%. but which our chief medical officer of health still won't tell physicians to prescribe in those rare cases of COVID that still pop up, right? Because heaven forbid that there's an off-patent, off-label effective treatment for COVID as opposed to Paxlovid or remdesivir, also known as Remdesivir, right? There needs to be some strong leadership moves. And what I really, really hope, because Danielle Smith, Premier Smith, promised this to us, and I was there when she made this promise at the APP leadership forum when she was running for the leadership, that there needs to be a public inquiry into all of this. Right? With subpoena power.
Not a government inquiry, a public.
No,
inquiry.
a public inquiry.
There should be a public. Yep.
With somebody with an open mind who's willing to consider all sides of the argument and not accept anybody calling anybody else's information misinformation or disinformation, or allowing the name calling that's been going on to take place, and force people to testify on the basis of science. Let's have all the scientists from Stanford who were there with Jay Bhattacharya talking about these things come forward. Let's have Dr. Shoemaker, who has provided an amazing presentation that I've seen of cardiac MRIs showing the hearts of COVID vaccine victims black on the MRI scans, half black on the MRI scans from the damage that was done to them by the vaccines. Let's have that presentation made to the public so that the public can then consider, whether any of the people that were involved in this should ever hold public office again, or should ever hold a job with the government or any position of responsibility in our society ever again. That's what I think needs to happen. And I think we've been at this for, an hour and a half, and we've probably inundated, all of, your readers with a lot of information that's probably pretty hard to.
And it is a lot of information. And so one of the questions as well I wanted to ask is, so we've gone through the class action part. This is when are we going to argue everything? What is the next process? When does the actual class action go through certification? Like, how long do you think that's going to take?
Well, where we're at right now is that Justice Dilts has reserved on the issue of whether we're going to have a striking application before we go straight into the certification hearing, right? So, and you heard what her calendar was like today in court. So probably the earliest, if the striking goes first, we could get in on the striking would be 3 months from now. Yeah. But I would also suggest, if we're going forward with certification, right, that we look at the timelines that we used in the business class action case. There's no reason that if Justice Dilts doesn't give in to Canada and Alberta's attempt to drag their feet on the way to the principal's office and bifurcate the proceedings by having a motion in front of a motion with regard to matters that are already subsumed in the original motion, right? If she doesn't allow that to happen, then, literally we could be at certification, I would think easily within 3 to 6 months, or alternatively, if they get to have, their motion about the motion, we get that done in 2 or 3 months, and then we get certification in the fall. Right. So, it's going to be this year. And needless to say, as you can tell from my attitude over this stuff and the approach that I'm taking to it, we're pedal to the metal on this and the business class action. And, I'm bound and determined that people will be held to account.
Good. And I did want to bring up that the second injection of Truth Healing Humanity is going to take place on Monday, March 3rd. And a lot of doctors will be there as well. Including, actually, I just want to kind of go through here, Dr. Gary Davidson, Denny Rancourt, David Martin, David Spector, Byron Bridle, Joni Liu, and Sean Buckley. And I'm pretty sure Chris and I will be there. I'm sure Jeff will be there.
I've been actually invited to join the panel on this. They just haven't updated their information. So, so I'll be there to update people on the class actions and to say things about Dr. Davidson's report that Dr. Davidson can't say about his report. So that should be a really interesting evening.
I mean, there's still a lot we could talk about. So, what is the process of if the government was to say, we're going to stop everything right now and take a look at it, and then we'll have the other side, if we want to call it sides, going, wait a minute, that's my right to go in. I'm now going to go to BC and get the shot. I'm going to go to Saskatchewan because there's no issues there.
Bye.
Yeah, well, I mean, absolutely. If you feel that strongly about it, by all means, go to BC or Saskatchewan. At least the liability is not going to accrue to the Alberta government.
That's true. Yeah, that's right.
Right? That's point number one. And if nothing else comes out of this, including our podcast this evening, maybe Mark Joffe will get the message that he needs to immediately advise the College of Pharmacists to send out an immediate emergency notice to the profession of pharmacology that Dina Hinshaw's ASL translation of medicine to the effect that mixing and matching the vaccines is fine and is good for you, will be put to bed once and for all, and stop having our fellow Albertans who've yet to still absorb the extent to which they've been misled. From at least getting hurt worse than they're going to be hurt by continuing to get boosters.
Yeah. Do you remember what the colleges did to doctors that pushed against their narrative, or the ones in BC, Daniel and Mel, that spoke up about the stillbirths? Do you remember that? They just they crucified them. Oh, come on! Look at Eric Payne. I mean, the College of Physicians and Surgeons went after Eric for 4 years. Yeah. And I know brilliant doctors in the province. Oh yeah, they're trying to. They're literally them and AHS. They and AHS have literally been trying to run Eric out of the province. He's one of the most qualified pediatric neurologists in Canada, if not the world, and they're doing their best to try to run him out of the province. And keep in mind, so it was all about Eric published a paper raising cautions from a pediatrician's perspective about the dangers of the vaccine. And then he was accused by the college, or accused by people that were put up by AHS, his so-called colleagues at Alberta Health, that he was guilty of misinformation. And I can tell you, as Eric's lawyer for 4 years, I was continually writing the College of Physicians and Surgeons to say, could you please specifically identify what it is that Dr. Payne has said that constitutes misinformation? In 4 years of litigation with the college over this, they were never, ever once able to tell my office or Dr. Payne what specifically was in his reports that constituted misinformation. Never, ever. And it's just like, our friends at the Alberta Medical Association saying that Dr. Davidson's report, is replete with misinformation. I saw a letter that John Carpe, an open letter that he wrote that was published in the Western Standard today. It actually mirrors a letter that I wrote of a confidential nature to the AMA saying, can you please identify for us in the report what specifically you characterize as misinformation? Because obviously, if you're saying that Alberta Health Services has provided false data, or if Pfizer's provided false data, or that Alberta Health has provided false data, or that Dina Hinshaw has provided bad medical advice to people, telling pregnant women to get shots and not telling parents that kids could die from COVID. I mean, if any of that's untrue, right? Can you please point us out, where it's untrue and how it's untrue and why it's untrue? And then we can have a really collegial discussion about this without a bunch of name calling. Why don't we do that, right? But of course, I don't ever expect to get a response from any of these people. Just like Timothy Caulfield not having the guts to show his face at the Stanford Symposium. It's the same thing. But consensus, international consensus, exactly. So that's what we're dealing with. Well, that's going to be a good. I think that's going to be a good little conference there. Yes, especially with this out now. Yeah. Gary's been under an NDA ever since this started, so he couldn't really speak publicly. Now he can speak to all of it. Yeah, well, he can certainly speak to the data in the report.
Unfortunately, he's not allowed to name names of, and that's the other thing too. I mean, the report specifically identifies that the report took as long as it did to produce because they were constantly being frustrated by Alberta Health AHS officials who refused to cooperate, refused to provide data, refused to provide information that was requested by the task force. I mean, one of the things that, I think comes out clear when you read the report is that this was, on behalf of the task force, this was an exercise in pulling teeth to get Alberta Health and Alberta Health Services to respond with any degree of transparency with regard to all of the horrible things that they did, right? So, that's something else that people need, to come in mind. I don't expect Gary's going to be able to show up on the 3rd and name names, but I sure as hell hope somebody does. And if it takes a public inquiry to get that done, then so be it. But a judge with subpoena powers, and and let's start subpoenaing records and force AHS and Alberta Health to produce records. I hope the shredders aren't running full time since this report came out, but who knows, they may be. But
the internet is forever anyway.
Well,
can we do it? Is there a mechanism for a public inquiry in this province or in this country?
Oh, absolutely. Right?
How does it happen?
You can even do it under the Fatality Inquiries Act. With regard to anybody that's died from the vaccine, we're going to try to address a lot of these issues through the Chad Hawes public inquiry, because I think the degree to which he was misdiagnosed, the degree to which people were reticent, even on his autopsy form, to acknowledge that the cause of death was the vaccines. The cause of death they put down as capillary leak syndrome, right? And I've said this in public court, open court. So this is no, that's when you bleed to death through your lungs. But then they say the cause of death was natural. And of course, what I pointed out to the court was that's like stabbing somebody 40, like somebody being stabbed 40 times. And then the coroner writing down on the autopsy form, cause of death, exsanguination, natural, without ever commenting that the cause of the exsanguination were the 40 stab wounds in his chest, right?
Well, bleeding is natural. So.
Yeah, especially when you drown in your own blood in your lungs, which is, effectively what they've consigned a lot of people to, right? So I think we're through the worst of it. I think from this point forward, and especially since our fellow citizens, have, the vast majority of us, like at least 94% of us have joined the ranks of the unvaxxed anti-vaxxers, right?
No more boosters, right?
Yeah, if you're a friend of mine did the math today, you're supposed to get a booster every 3 months. So anybody that has, I just want everybody to know that's listening, even if you're still kind of on the booster train, if you haven't had 15, you're a slacker and you're an anti-vaxxer. Wow. So you may as well just throw in the towel, because unless you've had 15 shots, you're not up to date, and you're obviously an anti-vaxxer and you're unvaccinated. So join the rest of us. You're unvaccinated if you haven't had 15 shots. So, there you go. Yeah. Any other offensive or inflammatory things that I can say before I leave, or have you pretty much minded this?
You've done an amazing job, Jeff. Jeff is just a tiger in the courtroom. It's awesome to watch, and Eva's there right beside him, tossing notes to him, because she didn't speak at all today, did she?
No, there wasn't really scope for it today. And we also had Mark Freeman from my office there. And Mark's actually, is actually an expert in class actions and has been involved in class action litigation, across Canada for decades, and has been involved in some of the country's biggest class action cases. So it's always nice that you don't hear Mark a lot, and he doesn't sit at the council table, but he's always a very steady presence in the courtroom for me. So I wanted to give Mark a shout out as well. Mark, he's the 33 going on 34-year council, and we're very happy to have him on board.
It's awesome.
So I should point something out. There's probably people wondering, like, whoa, why do we have to go through all this? Why does it take so much process? It all costs money. And the reality is, folks, you don't have to. We never had to in the first place. All we had to do, and all you had to do, is say no. Mm-hmm. That was it.
No, but there's another point to this too, and I've been encouraging more and more and more people to get politically active. Do Danielle Smith a favor. Do Danielle Smith a favor. You know, all these cabinet ministers that were in the COVID cabinet, start organizing in your writing, challenge their nominations, find people to run against them and replace them. Because you know what? I'm so sick and tired of any legislator in this province that thinks that they were elected to represent the government and to represent the bureaucracy and the bureaucrats instead of representing the constituents that voted them into office. And I think we need to have a revolution within the Conservative Party of Alberta, and we need to throw all of those bums out. You know, if you're not there for the people, you shouldn't be there at all. And I think that's where we need to start going with this, and everybody needs to focus on that. And then the other thing is, you know, what could be done to make these things move quicker? Everybody needs to write Danielle Smith. You need to write her and tell her how horrified you are about the task force report and how pregnant women were told to get the jab and it was good for them. The parents were told it was good to, you know, it was okay to mix and match the vaccines in their kids, that they were told to vaccinate their children at all. You know, Danielle Smith has the power to direct this. She's the Premier of Alberta. She has the power to direct the settlement of both of those lawsuits. You know, it's not, you know, all of this nonsense that, you know, people tried to feed her when, you know, Art Pulowski, you know, pulled his idiotic bonehead move, taping a conversation over, you know, COVID charges. These aren't COVID charges. The decision to settle multi-billion-dollar lawsuits is a decision made at the highest level, and it's made, you know, by the Premier in cabinet. And if the Premier comes to the considered decision that it's going to be far cheaper in the long run to immediately address damages and liability in the short run, then that's her decision to make. And I think everybody needs to encourage Danielle Smith to put pressure on her Attorney General to drop the appeal of the business class action, to immediately focus on the settlement of both of these cases and get after it. That's what she was elected to do. You know, and it was certainly what she was promising when she was running to be leader of the party. And I would note when every time now that we go to the annual general meetings and you see the thousands and thousands and thousands of people that are there, they're there because of her. They're not there because they support the Kenny cabinet holdovers, you know, that she still has in cabinet. You know, let's face it, when, you know, and I've said this before, you know, when Tyler Shandro and Jason Copping got booted out and replaced by NDP MLAs, it wasn't because all of a sudden there was an upsurge in NDP support in Calgary. The real reason they got booted out is every Calgarian in their constituencies that were disgusted with having their business destroyed, being locked in their homes, all of the horrible things that those two fine gentlemen did to people, right? Those people said, I don't care who gets elected in this constituency. I'm not going to go and vote for those people. Yeah. And they stayed home. So there wasn't a massive upsurge in NDP vote in Calgary. And I've discussed this with other constituency presidents across Canada and very senior people in the party who, you know, whose identities will remain nameless because I'm sure they don't want their names being bandied about in the context of this discussion. But very senior people in the party, when I have this discussion with them, which goes along the lines of, can we please stop pandering to the people that think that masks and vaccines save their lives? Because none of those people were ever going to vote for Danielle Smith or the Conservative Party anyway. They're always going to vote NDP. You're not going to change their minds, right? So let's stop worrying about those people and worry about the 10% of Calgarians, because the overall Conservative vote across Calgary was depressed by 10%. Because at least 10% of Conservatives in Calgary were too disgusted by what their Conservative government under Jason Kenney had done to them to be able to stomach getting up off the couch and going out to vote. So that's what we need to internalize. We need to get our people back. You know, and we get them back by telling the truth, being honest, addressing our mistakes, and saying, hey, you know, as a government, we completely screwed up. We need to make this right. And we're immediately going to negotiate a settlement to the business class action and to the vaccine class action. Why are we going to do it? Because it's the right thing to do. And maybe wouldn't it be nice if for once we elected, you know, legislators, to the legislature that were there because they wanted to do the right thing by the people instead of the right thing by the bureaucrats and the cabinet ministers who are hiding under their desks and trying to avoid responsibility.
That brings up another question besides this one that Janelle's asking.
Yeah.
So does that, I'm the representative plaintiff for the business class action. Does that make me a grifter stealing taxpayer money?
Well, of course not. If somebody from the government ran you over with their car or ran over a family member of yours with a car, are you a grifter because you'd want the government who self-insures to pay for it? Of course not. The government damaged you. They damaged millions of other people. There needs to be an acknowledgement of that damage, and there needs to be a settlement. Period. Mm-hmm. And obviously we can afford it, and we have all these bright boys and girls in the Department of Finance. Let's find a way once and for all for Alberta to become a have-not province, so all the money generated in this province can stay in the province to pay people that have suffered vaccine injuries, to pay people, whose businesses were destroyed through COVID, to rebuild, to build refineries in Alberta, keep all that money in Alberta as a nice have-not province, and let Quebec and Ontario pay us transfer payments for a change. I'm sure, the government of Quebec has an entire wing of its finance department that's figured out how to do it. Surely to God, we have accountants in Alberta that are well enough educated to cook the books the same way that Quebec has. So I think we need to get on that.
Yeah.
So Janelle had asked if there's a way that people can be charged criminally after this. Now I know that the legislation can be used as a shield when it's done in good faith. So what would make it so that people could civilly sue some of these people?
Well, I don't practice criminal law anymore. I mean, I did, when I was younger. I think the short answer is there is a possibility that criminal charges could be laid, and certainly either in conjunction with or following a public inquiry. Once we answer the questions, who knew what, when, where, and how, right? Once we have the answers to those 4 questions, then maybe we could start exploring the question of criminal culpability, and a special prosecutor could be appointed to consider the degree to which people who might have known from the outset that these vaccines were going to kill people but didn't care. I mean, if that were to happen, I'm not saying that it did, and it's frankly, I think I look at this more from the lens of just negligence and incompetence rather than criminality. But certainly, if evidence came forward that somebody in the Alberta government knew all of these things that I've been talking about tonight before the vaccines were ever rolled out and chose to ignore that for policy reasons or to advance their own careers or whatever it is, there's certainly a number of sections under the criminal code that would apply, right? But, that's not for me really to talk about. I think public inquiry, let's answer those 4 important questions: who knew what, when, where, and how. And then at that point, I think we can responsibly consider whether or not special prosecutors should be appointed and whether there should be further repercussions.
I was going to say
at the very least, there don't need to be criminal charges to throw these bums out and fire everybody that was involved.
I think there was a group of
MLAs. we know they can be fired because Danielle Smith has fired Dr. Hinshaw twice.
Yeah.
Right.
I think there was a group of MLAs that did get that information, but again, I actually think a lot of this had to do with bureaucrats, right? And they're not elected. So how do we?
Well, those MLAs were getting it from both camps.
Oh, of course.
And that was their thing. Well, these guys are saying this, and you're saying that, so we're just not going to do anything.
Right, but again, the issue with the unelected bureaucrats, I mean, simple solution is fire them. Especially the ones. Especially the ones that were playing hide the ball on the task force and not cooperating with the task force, providing information when requested, when they knew full well that the task force had been appointed under the Alberta Health Quality Assurance Council, right? So, that they knew that this was, that this was a very high level investigation initiated by the premier under government auspices, and they refused to cooperate. I mean, it's a no-brainer to fire all of them. So, and hope, maybe, we don't know, maybe they have been fired already. But if so, we'd like to know who they are, and I mean, I think employers in this province would like to know, who not to hire, maybe they can all go back to Quebec or Ontario or wherever the hell they came from, or BC or whatever. I mean, they can't all be Albertans. Maybe they can find jobs somewhere else. But I mean, all those people I think need to be weeded out root and branch and taken out of government so that this never happens again. This is just, when you read this entire report and, understand it from cover to cover, how every piece of it interrelates, it's just absolutely shocking. There's no other word for it. I mean, I'm in a complete loss for words.
Yeah, and
so
that
the criminal
never
charges is it's plausible, but it's kind of putting the cart before the horse at this point.
Yeah, I don't think it's responsible to talk about criminal charges until the civil litigation proceeds further, or a public inquiry that can answer those 4 key questions, right?
So
And
for the folks that are asking there's a lot of folks, they want heads to roll. I would suggest that you get involved. Start pushing. Start pushing for that public inquiry.
Run for office. Talk to your family and friends. Find if you have a bum for an MLA or a bum, and one of your MLA happens to be a bum of a cabinet minister that was involved in making all of these horrible decisions in the Kenny government, then all of your friends and neighbors should band together like angry villagers with pitchforks and peacefully, right, nominate a new candidate amongst your friends and neighbors. I'm sure, especially, like anywhere in Alberta, amongst our friends and neighbors, if you get 10 or 20 people together, all of you could collectively come up with a list of names to represent you who's far more qualified than the person currently representing you. This is Alberta. We have the highest number of, at least used to, I'm not sure where we're at post all of the, Trudeau-driven immigration to Alberta, but we used to have the highest number of university degrees per capita of any jurisdiction in the world, right? So we have enough well-educated, intelligent people here, that can all get together and maybe decide who would be better to represent them in, in the legislature than somebody who was involved in locking them up in their house, telling them how many friends they could have, telling their 18-year-old kid that he couldn't go to high school, but he could go watch the strippers. I forgot about that one. That was a good one. Remember that one? That was an oldie but a goodie, right? Yeah, you can't go to high school, but you can still go to the peelers, right? Like only in Alberta, right? That was a Dina Hinshaw health order, right?
Well, at least you're learning something, right?
Yeah, there you go. Advanced health class. Yeah.
Yes.
Wash your hands before eating.
Teresa Tam with the masks, and you can have sex and just don't breathe or touch her. That was just weird.
I hate to say it, Kerry, but that wasn't abnormal for that person. I mean, I think it was mostly with masks prior to that, but anyway, that's a little off topic.
I don't know. One of my favorite Teresa Tams, though, still to this day, was when she came forward and declared a new public health threat for Canada. And then, because COVID's over and we need to continue the reign of terror, presided over by the health bureaucracy.
Yeah.
So when she declared climate change to be a public health emergency and opined that the greatest causes of climate change in Canada were heteronormativity and ableism, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm, want a family and have a job, so I'm sorry for carbon emissions, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, there's Jesse.
I was just bringing up, there's other court cases going on as well. And of course, Jesse Johnson with the papers suing AHS. And in their statement of defense, they specifically state that they did not owe me duty of care.
Well, that's actually kind of interesting. I'd like to comment on that, right? Because again, this is a game of hide the ball, right? So the Alberta lawyers in court today were arguing that we should have sued AHS. They were almost suggesting the Alberta government doesn't have a duty of care. Maybe AHS had a duty of care. You should have sued them. But thank you, Without Papers Pizza, for letting me know that AHS even denies that it has a duty of care. So I guess we have what we see as the COVID shuffle, where AHS is now pointing at the government and the government's pointing at AHS. And all of these things will sort themselves out sooner rather than later. But again, Without Papers Pizza, in all seriousness, if you want to reach out to my office through our website, I'd be very interested in in looking at your pleadings with you and seeing where you're at. I got a feeling as to what type of lawsuit you've likely filed. I think Leighton
that's our friend Leighton. Yeah,
Leighton Gray is his.
Okay. So Leighton's doing a business class action, or what's he doing?
No,
I didn't know he was suing.
He's suing individually.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
But okay. Well, that's fine. If Layton's your lawyer, you're in capable hands. But no, but I love that AHS is saying that they don't have a duty of care, because apparently the Alberta government doesn't either. And really, at the end of the day, who should care? Really, they're just the ones that told us that we, who should care really? It's just it's just our lives, it's our businesses, it's our children, it's our babies, it's all of that stuff. Nobody should care, right? We're just cogs in the machine. Yeah, nobody should be responsible.
At the end of the day, we are responsible for ourselves, and that's why, like, sometimes it's hard, but we got to say no to that stuff, right?
Yeah,
we have to, because nobody else. They've all said that we don't have a duty of care to protect you. Well, that means that we better damn well protect ourselves.
Well, I'm still, I'm still cautiously optimistic that our premier is going to stand up and do the right thing. I think this report goes a long way to. To showing, to demonstrating in spades, what happened, through the pandemic that she needs to address immediately. And, hopefully, this is going to give her some real ammunition that she can use, in terms of dealing with all of these people that, that somehow claim that, like our friend, Mr. Caulfield, who, claims that the world is going to come to an end effectively, and we're in the dark ages 2.0 because somebody's suggesting that by no longer giving people shots that don't work to prevent the disease that it's supposed to prevent and don't prevent you from transmitting the disease to anybody else, etc., that somehow depriving people of that, oh my goodness, that's so valuable right, is going to bring an end to modern civilization. I think you guys posited two really good solutions that if you really, really believe that these shots and vaccines still work, then there's lots of other provinces that you can move to.
Yeah.
And why don't you go there? Because that would be better for all of us.
Or right? Better yet,
why do you want to be here in Alberta with all of us? We're 96% of us are anti-vax now. Like, you don't want to be here. Your remaining 5% of people that believe in the power of the great God vaccine, and you worship the COVID vaccine the way that cargo cultists worship Coke bottles washed up on the beach. Well, you guys carry on, but do it in BC. The climate's better. Have fun. Yeah. Don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. That's my attitude.
Yeah, I would wager $3 that Danielle Smith is going to act on this. That's
$3. That's it.
I just have a feeling. Well, I don't have. That's all I got. Sorry. I think something's going to come of this, and it's hard to be patient, and having seen what's going on. But
I still have faith. So I'm hoping that the day that she does make the announcements that we all hope that she does, that the three of us can get together in front of a really good bottle of Glenfiddich and toast her leadership. So anyway, I'm still cautiously optimistic that we're going to find ourselves there.
Me too.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, if that was a podcast,
big topic.
It's 2 hours almost.
It's so easy to talk to Jeff for 2 hours because he talks for an hour and 45.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, there's so much information to go over, and we could go another hour probably and still not get to the end of it. Like, we haven't even talked about the testing or the NPIs or any of those things.
Oh, I haven't even told you guys any of my really, really great COVID litigation war stories, some of which are frankly quite hilarious. But
maybe we should have you back for that one then. And
it's anyway. It's a lot of this stuff I think has to wait until I'm out of court.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Well, it's dealing with other lawyers and dealing with. Actually, the one that everybody's aware of. Here, I'll tell you a quick one, and then I really will let you guys sign off. But because Eric Payne and I were talking about it today, right? Because he was actually there with me, right? So, they're trying to fire, this is what AHS thought it was a really good idea in the middle of a so-called public health emergency to fire doctors and nurses who were assisting in, providing medical help to people during a health emergency who wouldn't get vaccinated, right? So Eric Payne, Greg Chan, Joanna Moser, these were some of my clients at the time. And I think we were examining Payne this one day. So anyway, guys from AHS come in and they make a big show of sitting down at their Zoom thing. removing their mask that they wore into the Zoom room to show that they're completely mask compliant, right? I'm sitting in the Zoom room at my office. And just for the record, my office had a strict no mask policy, right? So anyway, I walk into the Zoom room, sit down, obviously don't have a mask to take off. And I said, oh yeah, and for those of you that are wondering why I'm not wearing a mask, I just threw it out there for shits and giggles. I said, that's because I have a mask exemption, right? And not that I had an actual mask exemption, but in my own head, it's like, yeah, it's my office. I'm the boss. I set the policy, right? I'm quite comfortable telling anybody that they don't have to wear a mask if they want to come to work. And I'm damn well not going to wear one. So if you think you need a mask to protect yourself from me, you go right ahead. But I ain't wearing one. It's my office. And if you don't like it, you can work from home. I don't care about that either, right? But that's it. So I sit down and I jokingly say, I have a mask exemption. Well, my joke led to the College of Physicians and Surgeons raiding my personal physician's office the very next day.
I remember that. We did a podcast on that.
And out of 5,000, out of 5,000 some odd patients, right, that my doctor, has in his practice, they magically made a beeline directly for my medical record. To this day, I surmise that the reason was that some lawyer from AHS or some bureaucrat from AHS phoned the College of Physicians and Surgeons, gave them their marching orders that Jeff Rath and his doctor need to be taught a lesson because he has a mask exemption, and they sent people that were not allowed to refer to as Gestapo because that would be defamatory, so I'm not doing that, right? But they did send a guy, okay, he was not Gestapo, but he was a guy who was fired from Covenant Health for boundary violations, specifically continually sleeping with a subordinate after he'd been warned to stop, and then was surreptitiously doing it behind everybody else's back after he'd been told, no, don't do that no more. So anyway, he gets fired by public health. And of course, who else would hire a person with limited ethics but the College of Physicians and Surgeons, and put this guy in charge of rating my private medical file, reviewing my private medical information without my consent, right? So yeah, that's our College of Physicians and Surgeons. Right?
Note, folks, just so you're aware, there's legislation that says the College of Physicians and Surgeons can literally go to your doctor's office and take that information anytime they want for any reason.
Oh no, I'm well aware of it. I've been in the trenches.
Oh, I want to make sure that people know that that's how far it can go in this process.
Oh yeah, no, I've been in the trenches fighting the College of Physicians and Surgeons probably going on 20 years now. And I mean, some of the stuff that I've seen them do over the years has just been abominable. And that's why I keep, encouraging, Danielle to read, the Public Health Act, or the Public Health Professions Act, more correctly, that says that the Minister of Health can fire the entire college board on 60 days notice and then replace them with people that would willingly fire all of the registrars and everybody else that are there, and replace them with people that actually understand what informed consent means and not coercing people into medical procedures mean, and all those little things that one would expect a medical regulator to know, right? And again, but it's the same problem as we have with our Attorney General. If Mickey Amory isn't going to settle these lawsuits, then Danielle should fire him and replace him with an Attorney General that's prepared to roll up his sleeves and negotiate. She should also, if the health minister isn't prepared to fire the entire College of Physicians and Surgeons under authority that the health minister has, then Danielle Smith should fire that individual and replace that individual with, somebody who's willing to, enact or to take steps under legislation that empowers them to get rid of the College of Physicians and Surgeons. I personally think Todd Loewen would make an excellent health minister, right? Because I know when Todd Loewen was running for the leadership, and he said that he would fire everybody at the College of Physicians and Surgeons and fire every bureaucrat that was involved in all of these horrible decisions, he meant it. So, I mean, on that vote alone, I think I'd like to have Todd Loewen as our next health minister. Yeah. He's not going to thank me for this, by the way, not at all. In fact, he's
I don't
probably
know where he'd be more comfortable with.
He would, if Todd's listening to this, or if Todd hears of this, he's going to call me all kinds of names. I can tell you that right now.
God. Sorry.
Yeah. Health minister. There's the next health minister. That's going to be the most thankless job in the province of Alberta.
Yeah. That brings but we definitely do need a next health minister. There's no doubt about it.
Right.
That brings up another point. So there's a lot of people very disillusioned with government. They don't trust it's, they don't believe in the process anymore. I will tell you this, and I know this to be true 100%. There are some really good people there, and Todd is one of them. There are some really, really good, honest, ethical people in our government right now, and they do care about you. Mm-hmm. He's one of them.
Yeah, and to quote, I think three very important words in the context of what we're talking about. First of all, never give up, but second of all, fight, fight, fight. Like we cannot give up.
I've seen that before.
Yeah, I think I've seen it too, but I think it's really important that everybody, pay attention, wake up. The time is now. And we can enact the same kinds of sweeping changes in Alberta, as are happening in other jurisdictions, which we're all quite gleefully watching right now. Mm-hmm. So, I think that, everybody just needs to come together and realize that, that we're the adults in the room and we all need to come together and start cleaning house and putting our house back in order.
And if you want to really do that, folks, head over to the AlbertaProsperityProject.com and check out what they have to say about fixing the problems that we currently are in.
I just had a long discussion with my good friend and colleague Dennis Modry. He's prevailed upon me to re-engage with APP, so I think I'll be having a chat with Mitch Sylvester in the near future. So
that sounds awesome.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Most of our problems that we're experiencing right now, they can only be dealt with if we take control of our own futures, and there is only one way to do it.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, we keep saying we're going to sign off, and then we go on for another 10 minutes.
That's what happens here. And then everybody's ready to. Oh, okay. No, they're still talking. So
we do that.
Our viewers are used to that.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Really appreciate your time. It's always a pleasure, even though you talk even longer than I do. But the information that you give us is invaluable. And by that I mean it's very valuable. So thank you again.
Guys, it's always a pleasure, and I'm happy to come back whenever you want me. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to everybody. There we go. Fight.
There you go. Amen, Jeff.
All right, I'm signing out. Over and out, guys. Right. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Well,
oh man,
my ears are.
Jeff is awesome.
He really is, and he is a fighter. The guy's an absolute machine in the courtroom. As I was watching today, at one point the judge kind of gave him a little bit of the gears, said something like, "Don't read to me. Don't ever read to me." And I was like, "Whew, man, if that was me, I'd turn into a pile of jello up there." But he just continued on, totally professional. But he's also been at it for almost as long as I've been alive. So yeah, hell of a lawyer.
Yeah. Awesome. So I mean, obviously we don't know when the next date will be or anything, but we'll definitely keep our viewers abreast of the situation of what we can find out. And I know, Chris, if you haven't realized what's been going on in the last couple of months, so we kind of took a little bit of a hiatus of not doing these, and then Chris took it amongst himself. Maybe it was a 2025 kick in the ass, and you said, "I'm going to start doing these." And so you've got a few more people coming out. I'm not going to name names right now because it doesn't matter. But we've got a few more. Well, I mean, because we've got things in the queue, and there's
what's in the queue. Why are you hiding it? What's going on here?
I'm not. I'm just saying that if somebody wants to know, then they'll tune in on tomorrow.
Well, I'm going to tell them,
or Friday, or whatever day.
I'm excited. So, okay, I'm going to tell you why I decided to start doing some podcasts again. It's not that I have any more time per se, but some of the things that are going on in the world have been really encouraging me. Like I started waking up after Trump was president-elect, not even sworn in yet. I felt emboldened that I could, start talking about more stuff. I felt like I could share my faith a little bit more because the world was moving in a direction away from what we've seen, where people are persecuted for speaking truth. That's what we've seen over the last few years. And so I started to feel a little bit different. And then as it progressed, I'm like, holy crap, we actually have an opportunity for something amazing to happen, not only in Alberta, not only in Canada, but across this whole world. And I want to be part of it. Like, I want Alberta. I still believe Alberta is going to be the leader. We should be the tip of the spear that takes this entire woke BS, anti-human, anti-God crap down. And that could be, and it should be Alberta. So I'm very encouraged by that. And one of the things that I can do, and a very small thing I can do, is just have conversations, and people can watch it, and hopefully they learn something new, and they can have a conversation with someone over coffee. And that's the way the world changes. So that's what I want to do. I've been inviting as many guests as I can onto the Chris and Kerry show to talk about Alberta independence, which is extremely important, probably the most important thing right now on the horizon in this province. I've been talking about some of the stuff around the COVID things and what the government's doing and those types of things. Another really important thing. Tomorrow, our guest is none other than our burger-eating friend, Sheila Gunn-Reid from
That's
Rebel
on
News.
Thursday, though, isn't it? I know. Today's only Tuesday.
Oh yeah, that's on Thursday. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, I'm behind today or ahead of today. Yeah, it's Sheila Gunn-Reid on Thursday, and I wanted to have a chat with Sheila Gunn-Reid because she is so knowledgeable on this province and Alberta independence and government and all of those things. Like, I just can't wait to hear what she has to say about current events, and hopefully that will motivate more people to get involved and do more things. And that's really what it's about, Kerry, is just getting involved and doing stuff, right? Do something. Like that Clyde guy we know. Just do something. Right, Kerry? What are you doing? Are you doing something? Wow.
I just got some bad news. Can I just leave for a second? I'll be right back.
Yes. Okay.
Sorry.
Well, that is not good news. Okay. Well, I guess after 2 hours and 11 minutes, it's time to sign off anyway. So thank you very much, folks, for watching. Please remember the things that Jeff said, especially about getting involved. You bring enough people and you bring them with you to your goal, and you will win. And you just got to make it too big to rig, and then we can change the world. So let's do that together. And hopefully here at the Chris and Kerry Show, we can give you some ideas on how to do that. So thanks again. Don't forget to visit www.albertaprosperityproject.com, my favorite educational society devoted to Alberta prosperity for Albertans by Albertans. In there, you will find all of the solutions that we need, and we can get there, and we will get there if we work together. So night, folks. Here's my cat, Stumpy, for you.